Predisposed, nothing that was there originally. I might have gotten confused, but it's just a simple step with my foot up in the air. My body weight came down on it, sort of got twisted up, and was just one of those missteps. And didn't have any predisposed issues. Man, my ankles were feeling really good. I don't think he really should share how many surgeries I've had in the past, to be honest with you, because he doesn't really even know that.
Kind of strange.
Listen, I know I'm the wrong messenger for this. No one in the media was more wrong about the Broncos this year than me, and I have been a unintentional Denver sports pessimist dating back to it being the last one on the Jokic train. So I get nobody wants to hear this from me, but this is a weird 96 hours from a team that had, by any objective measure, a wildly successful season that ended when it did. One of the only ways you can lose a home conference championship game, and if you handle the PR right, nobody's mad at anybody.
Yeah.
Got unlucky. What do you want us to? Our quarterback broke his ankle on the second to last play of the divisional round game, and we were right there. And you know what? If not for a snowstorm and a tipped field goal, might have stolen it. Instead, Sean Payton fired 3 coaches, including his offensive coordinator, who attributes his firing to, and I quote, Sean was in one of his moods.
That was strange.
And then Bo Nix calls his own press conference. The team didn't set this up. Bo Nix calls his own press conference to correct what he considers misinformation, not from the dark web or AI or bots, but from his head coach. That ain't great. And so it's not nothing that all of a sudden it really sounds like Sean, the quarterback of the Broncos, is upset with the head coach of the Broncos. That's something, and it's something weird.
Yeah, it's definitely something. And it's strange because typically from the top down, meaning, execs, coaches to the players, it's need to know basis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not I'm going to offer just information just because I want to fill you guys in on all the nuts and bolts and the crannies of it all. No, that's not how it works. So I understand, and I'm with Bo on trying to defend this idea of there was something lingering or
I think it was a ticking time bomb.
Like, no, because that almost insinuates to a player who, number one, during the process of going to Indy, going through the entire combine process, all of this is knowledge to every team. They have all this information on your medical history. So you're trying to defeat the odds of this idea of, are you injury prone? Do you always have issues with your ankles? Like, do you think there's going to be something moving? He was probably asked this stuff every day in Indy. And then to have your head coach offer all this information when you, as a head coach, typically tell us as players, specifically don't speak on anybody else's injury. Don't speak on anybody. Even if you feel like you have an idea, let that be up to the training staff and or that specific player. Bo, he mentioned he's upstairs, he's doing good. Leave it at that. He had the injury, he's recovering, he wants to be here for off-season program. That's all we care about. Like, period. He's in a position where he's trying to defend himself because he knows contracts coming up.
Yes.
I don't want to be labeled as somebody that is an injury risk.
Correct.
So, but you as my head coach, you're putting this out there as if this is possibly something that I'm going to have to be concerned about, and everyone should know that just in case. I mean, this is something that we're going to be circling moving forward. It's unfair to Bo.
I'm glad you mentioned contract because that's kind of one of the only explanations for Sean Payton saying this. I mean, you said it. Usually you're not giving out this type of information. Now, I do think he's correct. Bo has had several ankle injuries and surgeries. He had surgery after last season. He broke his ankle in college. He broke it in high school. He had surgery after last season when he didn't really get injured. This year, obviously, injury and surgery. But to me, the only reason for Peyton to put that out there is almost to be like, to lower his value. Not that they don't want to keep him, but to lower his market value. So let's say when it's time to re-up him, they don't want to give him $50 million or $60 million.
Right then, everyone, would you just listen to this? Goodness gracious. Is this genuinely the level of discourse we're navigating during the off-season now? I mean, truly. We have arrived at a juncture where individuals are earnestly proposing that Sean Payton is orchestrating a deliberate campaign to depreciate Bo Nix's market valuation to facilitate a more economical contract, and that this stratagem was formulated merely days following the agonizing defeat in the AFC Championship game. I must say, the very notion demands a moment of pause. This is rather extraordinary. Well then, which particular avenue of analysis should we pursue regarding this matter? The scenario presents multiple distinct trajectories for examination, and in all likelihood, we will traverse each and every one of them comprehensively. Prior to our deep dive, an indispensable courtesy. I must implore you to view this video in its entirety and to activate the subscription function during your viewing. This action constitutes, beyond any reasonable doubt, the paramount method for fostering the expansion of this platform. Your support in this manner is what empowers the ongoing creation of the most superior Denver Broncos-related material available. Having said that, I want to be unequivocal. I possess a profound and complete understanding of the sentiment behind Bo Nix's reported reaction at this juncture. It is entirely comprehensible. Furthermore, the entire episode is peculiarly compelling. It is compelling precisely due to the substantial ambiguity that envelops the core details from an external vantage point. The professional franchise, the Denver Broncos, will be granted, or perhaps already possesses, complete access to the entirety of pertinent medical documentation and the nuanced particulars of all clinical discussions. This paradigm stands in stark opposition to the conventional principles governing patient-physician confidentiality. Under normal circumstances, an individual's health data remains a private matter, safeguarded by statutory frameworks such as HIPAA. A more fitting analogy might be a situation wherein a young adult executes a legal release, thereby permitting their parents or guardians comprehensive access to their medical history and ongoing treatment details. I am entirely confident that a vast quantity of administrative documentation exists, duly signed, which authorizes the Broncos organization, or indeed any NFL franchise, to procure every conceivable fragment of information they might deem necessary. There is almost no plausible context in which a quarterback, or any athlete on the roster, can merely assert, "I am in optimal condition, the physician has confirmed a clean bill of health," and the franchise's leadership is then expected to accept that declaration purely on faith. The institution fundamentally retains the prerogative to access all underlying data and professional opinions. As a direct consequence of this reality, the central thesis that an injury of this specific nature was inevitable or preordained becomes an exceptionally challenging concept to decipher and contextualize with any precision. This inherent difficulty does not instantly substantiate the injury-prone designation that several commentators are hastily applying. Allow me to endeavor to illustrate this complexity with a more tangible parallel. Contemplate the following instance. It is anatomically possible for an individual to possess a supernumerary or extra bone structure within their foot. This person could proceed through life entirely asymptomatically until a specific traumatic incident transpires. That particular injury might then create a clinical imperative for the surgical excision of that superfluous osseous structure, and a legitimate possibility exists that full functional recovery may not be achieved. I was once acquainted with a professional ballet performer who encountered this exact medical circumstance. The additional bone was removed, but their physical capability was irrevocably altered, leading effectively to the termination of their performance career. Within such a specific case, a medical expert could rationally conclude that the underlying issue was intrinsically structural. It was, in a certain philosophical sense, destined to manifest at some point. Now, it is crucial to acknowledge that this is not necessarily an exact corollary to Bo Nix's specific situation, based on the fragments of information available to the public. Interpreting the commentary from Sean Payton, and I operate under the firm conviction that he is not engaging in wholesale fabrication, as such behavior would be utterly irrational. He was evidently the recipient of communicated information from medical staff. The conveyed message appeared to be along these lines. The prevailing medical assessment suggests this particular outcome possessed a high degree of statistical likelihood. The variable was not so much the possibility of occurrence, but rather the precise temporal point of its occurrence. The surgical intervention was clinically indicated to fortify and guarantee long-term anatomical stability. Therefore, one might hypothesize a scenario involving a congenital anatomical predisposition that has subsequently been rectified through a surgical procedure involving internal fixation, such as a plate or analogous hardware. To be perfectly candid, I lack even elementary knowledge regarding the precise surgical technique employed in his case. The array of potential interventions is considerable: a solitary screw, a single reinforcing plate, multiple orchestrated plates. The surgical repertoire is extensive and varied. I can draw upon a personal anecdote for comparison. I previously sustained a fracture of my clavicle, and the spectrum of management options presented to me spanned from conservative, non-surgical healing to the insertion of an intramedullary rod to the application of a plating system. Furthermore, within the plating approach itself exist sub-options, utilizing one robust plate or employing two more slender plates in a specific biomechanical configuration. The essential takeaway is this: it is virtually futile for us, as external observers devoid of specific clinical details, to claim an understanding of the complete medical narrative. I recall when I suffered a meniscal tear several years prior, the attending orthopedic surgeon referenced identifiable muscular imbalances and observed certain relative weaknesses that potentially increased my susceptibility to such an injury. He contextualized it as an eventual probability given those physiological conditions. Thus, did a member of the Broncos' medical staff offer a similarly framed observation to Sean Payton in passing, which he then subsequently distilled and communicated publicly as, "This was always going to happen"? It is readily apparent how such a statement could become detached from its original, nuanced clinical context. The reality is that a significant proportion of the population exhibits some form of muscular asymmetry or imbalance. That common condition resides on an entirely different plane of significance compared to a quantifiable structural anomaly like an accessory bone. The gradient of severity and implication is vast, and the distinction is critically important. This entire episode underscores an intrinsically awkward and delicate position in which professional athletes often find themselves, a dynamic that is frequently underrepresented in public discourse. These individuals are navigating a distinctive phase of nascent adulthood. For a substantial number, securing a position as a National Football League athlete represents their inaugural, authentic, high-pressure, professional occupation. The experience of collegiate football, while undoubtedly a primary focus, operates within a fundamentally different ecosystem. The NFL is their vocation, their career in its most concentrated form. Every facet of their professional existence orbits around their capacity to perform at the league's elite level. They are individuals aged 22, 23, 24, who find themselves abruptly invested with considerable influence, substantial financial remuneration, and public notoriety. Simultaneously, they must interact and collaborate with institutional pillars such as the head coach, the general manager, or the franchise owner, entities who inherently wield even greater organizational authority. The relational dynamic does not conform to a conventional subordinate-superior corporate template. It is more intricate, more symbiotic, and represents a more negotiated two-way partnership. In what other profession does an employee routinely possess the latent capacity to effectively state, "This collaborative relationship with my direct supervisor is non-viable. Procure me an alternative," by appealing straight to the principal owner of the enterprise? That specific configuration of power and influence is remarkably uncommon, and is rendered especially unique when the employee in question is the anointed franchise quarterback. Hence, yes, it constitutes an unusual and complex interpersonal landscape. For the devoted supporters of the Denver Broncos, this ongoing public conversation is understandably a source of significant vexation and frustration. Nevertheless, I am of the firm opinion that we must resist the impulse to magnify its importance beyond rational proportion. We should abstain from precipitously endorsing conclusions such as, "Payton is engaged in a covert effort to devalue his player," or, "This incident definitively labels Knicks as inherently fragile." At its most fundamental level, what has transpired is the public dissemination of sensitive medical information beyond the boundaries of appropriate disclosure, information that Bo Nix, unquestionably, would have preferred remain private and confidential. Sean Payton, in his public communications, likely exceeded the boundaries of prudent disclosure. While I'm inclined to believe that the substantive information he relayed was likely rooted in some form of factual medical reporting, the pivotal and unanswered questions are these. What is the authentic clinical gravity of that underlying fact? Does it reside on the more benign end of the diagnostic spectrum, analogous to commonplace muscular imbalances, or does it occupy the more serious end, akin to a notable structural variance? Moreover, what is the definitive prognosis following the completion of the corrective surgical procedure? Is it a definitive, the predisposing condition has been conclusively addressed and his future prognosis is excellent? Or does it imply a more persistent underlying susceptibility? The potential interpretations and implications span an enormously wide continuum of possibilities. I also harbor a perspective regarding Sean Payton's underlying motivation for publicly broaching this subject. It is conceivable that his intent, however clumsily executed, was to furnish a form of consolation and psychological stability to a fan base currently engulfed in the anguish of a profoundly painful postseason defeat and the concomitant injury to a pivotal athlete. Advancing a narrative of "this was likely an inevitable occurrence" can, in a counterintuitive manner, attribute the event to a sense of destiny or predetermined fate, rather than to mere random malicious misfortune. It represents an attempt to introduce a semblance of predestined order into a landscape that otherwise feels chaotically unfair and bitterly disappointing. It is essentially an effort to communicate. This was not merely an arbitrary, fluke accident that could have been circumvented by different circumstances. It is abundantly clear, based on available reports, that Bo Nix did not welcome this public exposition of personal medical context. However, I would strongly advise against inflating this incident into a portrayal of a fundamental, irreparable schism between player and coach. This type of fallout is, to a significant degree, an inherent byproduct of failing to achieve the ultimate goal of victory. The team had secured the coveted #1 playoff seed, accompanied by the strategic advantage of hosting games throughout the postseason. They achieved a dramatic victory over Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills in an overtime contest. Subsequently, they endured a crushing 10-7 loss in a championship game they demonstrably could have won, even with their backup quarterback assuming duties, not to mention with a fully operational Bo Nix. That specific loss is emotionally devastating and psychologically taxing for all parties invested. In the aftermath, every stakeholder instinctively seeks explanatory rationale. Why was Bo Nix injured at that precise moment? Why could another key performer not have elevated their execution by an additional 2%? Why was that critical field goal attempt obstructed? Why was that specific play design selected on a pivotal fourth down decision? Within that heightened atmosphere of spiraling retrospective analysis and what-if conjecture, a declarative statement like, "This injury was a probable eventuality all along," can, in a paradoxical sense, generate a fragile perception of stability. It supplants a dizzying multitude of chaotic, independent variables with a singular, linear, and seemingly deterministic causal explanation. It offers a narrative anchor, however controversial. The communication was indisputably a misstep, a lapse in judicious public relations management. That conclusion is inescapable. However, let us collectively decline to adorn ourselves with metaphorical tinfoil headwear and proceed to construct elaborate narratives of unmitigated disaster, of calculated front office sabotage, or of irreconcilable interpersonal conflict. The underlying reality is almost certainly more prosaic. Individuals across the organization are upset, profoundly disappointed, and genuinely disheartened. They possessed a legitimate, tangible opportunity to contend for a Super Bowl championship, and that opportunity evaporated due to a multifaceted confluence of contributing factors. As a baseline expectation, an appearance in the Super Bowl itself seemed a plausible minimum achievement. Following the dissolution of such a promise, it is an innate human response for every involved party to engage in a search for causative answers, for rationale, and for meaningful explanation. Nevertheless, these reflections represent solely my personal analytical perspectives on the unfolding circumstance. I am exceedingly keen to solicit and engage with your own viewpoints and interpretations. What are your collective thoughts regarding this entire evolving situation involving the Denver Broncos organization and quarterback Bo Nix? Whatever your position may be, whether it aligns with my own reasoning or stands in direct opposition to it. I encourage you to articulate those thoughts in the commentary section below. I make a dedicated commitment to review each and every submitted comment. Let us stimulate a vibrant discussion. Let us engage in spirited yet respectful debate. But ultimately, let us ensure that the process remains an engaging and enjoyable exploration for all participants. If you have not yet done so, please sincerely consider subscribing to this channel. We are in the process of cultivating a truly exceptional and passionate community here, and I would be absolutely honored to welcome you as a participating member within it. The overarching objective is to forge a digital space where we collectively feel a sense of connection, shared interest, and genuine enthusiasm, and tangible progress is being made toward that goal each day. Furthermore, please remember to assign a positive rating to this video by selecting the thumbs up icon. This action genuinely and materially assists with digital visibility and platform algorithmic promotion. Thank you so profoundly for your time and attention. I look forward to connecting with you again next time.